Hi, I have a question regarding roads.
Yep.
In Unreal, you can use like splines to create a road or streets and such. But if I'm understanding correctly, it can become like a small issue when you're making intersections.
Yeah.
Like, what's the best solution or workflow for creating roads in games in general? Is it like using only modular meshes and snapping, only using splines, a mix, or something entirely else?
Like without being an expert, I would say you always have to get the combination. You will run into situations where your like main method doesn't work. I mean, if you have a street kind of a flat landscape, it's obviously easy. You don't have to use like spline meshes and stuff. But one point on spline meshes is that you only get accurate tangents on the spline points. So
Mm.
don't use the you know, tangent at distance from on spline or something because that tangent will not be like very accurate. So that's one point. I mean, it takes a little more time to clone out all the points, but you got a lot more controls, a lot more control. So it will pay off in the end anyway. Um,
Okay, thank you.
yeah, thank you.
Um, is there any approach you would recommend about modularity? Like, is it better to have a load of large pieces or smaller pieces?
Um, I think I would keep like the small pieces in my DCC like Maya or Houdini and maybe have larger pieces in Unreal. But that's a preference. Like before I used Houdini, I made lots of stuff like right in Unreal because I only use ZBrush and Unreal pretty much. But now when I got Houdini, I mean placement and everything is a bit more exact or like easy to get it accurate. So uh, um, yeah, so that would be my inclination would be to keep like larger pieces in Houdini in Unreal and smaller pieces in the DCC.
About the Houdini Unreal workflow, when you're exporting from Houdini to Unreal, so you got your modular parts. Um, sorry, I'm just trying to formulate the question.
Yeah, yeah,
uh, is each so let's say I've got a building with three wall variations.
yeah,
In Unreal, if I was building the, the building manually, um, one one building parts would be one. 10 building parts would be one draw crawl,
yeah.
and so on. In Houdini, does it mean that every building part where it's placed is like one draw call? So to have those three repeating meshes, I'm not sure I'm being very clear.
Yeah, yeah, but I get your kind of thoughts. Actually, a lot of times I would make like a static mesh out of Houdini, so like an FBX export them to because for instance the Houdini plugin doesn't work on mobile, at least not iOS. So you have to disable the plugin even if you're not using it. So uh, I'm not sure, but I heard that even if you have like multiple materials on a mesh, it will result in like separate draw calls. So um, I would use masking as much as possible. Like I mean, and that's a big advantage from going over like substance painter, like making masks and making like only three textures or four, five for each asset. Um, so yeah, and I mean,
So if I've
on draw calls and all that, or efficiency, I have to say like I can make like a small demo on instancing, because the point of instancing is that even though you have like a million meshes, it will only make one draw call. Um, but it's a bit different from I don't know how much blueprinting you've done, but I make this like simple like cloning blueprints. So if you're interested, I can make like a super quick one, just showing how to make an instance in Blueprint. Um, it's not going to be a complete like house generator, but you know it could be useful. Um, so if you make something that you want to be visible in editor, you have to make it in construction script. And what you do is you have one component, because if you make it like 10 copies of something, you have to if you do static meshes, you will add like 10 um, 10 static mesh components. But if you make instances, you only like one instance static mesh component, and that one can hold only like a bunch of transforms that will place like the same actual mesh in all places and draw it all as like one in one draw call. And that's also when like world space variations will come into play, because you can use these like vertex position offset and all these kind of modifications in the shader and still do the like one draw call huge amount of assets in the instance direct mesh thing. I even made like a placement interactive placement of instances, like you do with foliage for more custom parts too. So int number of instances. This, I mean, this is not like exactly the answer to the question, but it's just a useful thing. I think for if anyone's interested, you can just check it out. Loop. Right. Loop. For loop. Ah, okay. It's hard to type today. Boom. Let's be accurate, like -1. So um, for like a regular static mesh, you would just like kind of add components here. But for the instancing, you will add just one static mesh instance static mesh component. Get. And on this side, you will just add instances to this one. And you can do world space, it doesn't matter. So usually I do relative space so I can move them around. But if you're placing like world space stuff, of course you use world space. Transform, make, and for like easy, just int times float. Promote this one. Distance apart. Instance editable. Default to 1 meter. So take the index, multiply it by the distance, split this one, place it on Y. In Unreal, X is the forward direction, which is different from most other software. But so like for this guy, X is the forward, and that's important sometimes. So it's kind of background if you're not coding lots of vectors, but it's good to know. And also here you can set the mesh. Compile. Okay. Oh, 10. 10 instances, one draw call. Um,
Just a quick question about
yep,
that. In the building generator I made, I used mesh array.
yep.
So is uh, basically every time I place, I mean, I made different versions of it. I made one where you could just swap between the meshes. Is every time I'm placing that blueprint with 3 meshes in it, is it doing 3 draw calls to that mesh? Or
Do you have 3 instance direct mesh components? I haven't used the mesh array thing.
no, I basically plugged into the not the instance that I did. It was get mesh. I can't remember the. Sorry, I was. Hold on, I'll just start up my file and ask the question after.
Yeah, yeah. From what I understand, if you use a different mesh, you're gonna get a different draw cost. So, yeah, so for like 3 meshes, you get 3 draw costs, which is still not a lot. I mean, it's still very efficient. And yeah, then you would have a switcher somewhere and 3 components. I mean, of course, you can create this component with code too. Um, uh, and if you have the switch, you will obviously create one instance. If I did this way, I would